Welcome to the fantasy zone. Get ready.
Space Harrier is something of a strange beast. It was designed by the legendary Yu Suzuki and hit the arcades back in 1985. My God, do I feel old. Now, for me personally, this is a game I remember extremely well. At this particular point in time, I was spending a ton of time in the arcades because my newly acquired NES couldn't hold a candle to what was being played in the arcades. And the same is true for my trusty Atari 2600. I remember being absolutely blown away by Space Harrier when I first got the chance to check it out. It's sort of a funny story because Space Harrier helped usher in the 16-bit arcade generation, and this port you're seeing here, which was released on the SEGA 32X, sort of helped usher in the downfall of SEGA in the hardware business. So it's kind of interesting to look back today, so many years later, and have these two completely different feelings associated with this game. Back in the day, this was one of the first games, or well, hell, maybe it was the first game, to feature a true analog stick. You could move your character around the screen freely, but depending on the angle of the stick, your character would move quicker. We take this stuff for granted today pretty much, but back in '85 this was a really big deal. And I already said that this was one of the first 16-bit arcade games, but it deserves being mentioned again. This game looked so much better than everything else in the arcades at that particular point in time. I mean, gone were the days of Donkey Kong, Space Invaders, and Pac-Man. Now we had titles like Space Harrier, which looked just about, well, 3D. It was really mind-blowing stuff. I also remember that the arcade cabinet was one of the first cabs that you actually sat in, much like Afterburner, and it was such an amazing experience. The gameplay, as a whole, is really simple. Dodge everything on the screen that you can't destroy with your blaster, and, well, destroy everything you can. That's it. That's all. There's 18 levels of pure awesomeness, and the only way I ever finished this game was going through a whole buttload of quarters. Now comes the time to start getting a little bit misty-eyed. You see, for as awesome and innovative as Space Harrier was back in 1985, this 1994 port for the 32X is pretty much anything but. Sure, it looks and sounds just about identical to the arcade version, but remember, this was literally months before the launch of the Sega Saturn. Now, I might be mistaken about the dates I'm going to mention to you here, but I believe the game launched in December of 1994, or somewhere around there, and the Saturn hit, in North America at least, in May 1995. So by this particular point in time, gamers' tastes had really already started to change quite significantly. People were enthralled with all the 3D game previews they were seeing in the latest magazines. While the 32X had a successful launch, the impending launch of both the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation pretty much destroyed the add-on several months after it hit the scene. By mid-1995, the 32X was pretty much dead in the water. It was also one of the major turning points for Sega as a corporation, as they would follow up the 32X with an extremely poor performance by the Sega Saturn, and that would eventually lead Sega to leave the hardware business with the Dreamcast by 2001. So it's a real shame how this game had such a personal connection to me on one hand, and yet this port pisses me off so much on the other because it was literally the beginning of the end for Sega. And I know a lot of you guys will say that the beginning of the end was with the Sega CD, but for me, at least that device had some really great games and lasted a couple of years. With the 32X, while it too did have some really standout, stellar games, it didn't even make it a year. Regardless how you feel towards the 32X add-on though, this game in particular is a fantastic port of an arcade classic. And outside the Saturn version, I believe this is probably the best version that was ever released. The 32X was such a commercial bomb that you can pick one up for a relatively decent price these days, and a copy of Space Harrier will only set you back around maybe $20 or so. It's really worth checking out if you like arcade games or you're looking for just a really good way to spend an afternoon having fun. Go check out Space Harrier on the SEGA 32X.
Get ready. Get ready.